Welcome everybody to the Phorge Makerspace online classes. My name is Spencer, and I have my friend with me, Steve. Oh, I guess he's on the other side. Cameras are backwards. I have my friend Steve with me today. Basically, just want to give you guys an introduction real quick as to what Phorge is, what we do, and why we're giving you this video podcast today. So first, I'd like to say Phorge is a makerspace, and if you're not familiar what that is, Steve, you want to go ahead and give them a rundown? Welcome everybody to
Sure. So a makerspace is
Phorge
a place where you
Makerspace
can
online
come. It's a little bit
classes.
like the YMCA, where you go to rent equipment. You basically have a membership to come and use the equipment, learn how to use that equipment. Um, Instead of exercise equipment, makerspace is for tools that you can make things with, like 3D printers, CNC mills, metal and wood lathes, those sort of things. So you want to get a new product to market and you don't know how to make it, well, come by and we can either teach you how to make it or connect you with people who do.
Right. So long story short, we make things, and and this kind of hit me the other day when I was strolling through Walmart, and lucky for me, or I don't know if I say lucky or unlucky, but my dogs had ringworm recently, and so we had already stocked up on hand sanitizer before this whole debacle happened. But essentially, when I was rolling through the store, I noticed that all the hand sanitizer was gone, and it got me thinking, well, how hard could that be to make? And I'm sure that a lot of people have thought this way, and as evidence of that, as I was using Facebook the other day and Twitter, I noticed all these recipes for hand sanitizer popping up. I started to do a little bit of research into, like, are these recipes accurate? Does it really work? Because that's just kind of how my mind works. I'm always curious if the people are doing things the right way. Well, digging a little bit deeper into my research, I found that hand sanitizer has to be a minimum of 60% alcohol and a maximum of about 90. Surprisingly, 100% alcohol does not sanitize your hands, which also means that vodka will not sanitize your hands either, being as vodka is usually somewhere around 80 proof or 40%. So the question of this episode is about hand sanitizer, and the question is it possible to make an effective formulation at home? What do you think, Steve? Can we do it?
Absolutely.
All right. So did a little bit more research on the World Health Organization's website. There actually is a recipe, and it's kind of a large scale recipe. If I can, here, let me pop this on the screen here real quick. So this is the World Health Organization's recipe. As you guys can see, it says Guide to Local Production. This is a whole 9-page info packet here. And they have two formulas, essentially. If I can zoom in on this a little bit. The first formula uses ethanol, which is ethyl alcohol, or actually the alcohol that you drink that gets you drunk. And the other formulation's main ingredient is isopropyl alcohol, and they're using 99.8%. Some of the other ingredients include hydrogen peroxide, glycerol, and sterile distilled or boiled cold water. Let me zoom back out here. All right, so as I'm looking through this recipe, I noticed that these guys are making 10 liters. I mean, 10 liters is a lot, and so we didn't need to make that much hand sanitizer for this demonstration here. Basically, as we can see, the final product here wants a final concentration of 80% ethanol in formulation 1, 80% ethanol, 1.45% glycerol, and 0.125% hydrogen peroxide. Whereas formulation 2 is 75% isopropyl alcohol, 1.45% glycerol, and 0.125% hydrogen peroxide, with the remaining percentages being water. So I figured this recipe is a pretty good starting point because it is recommended by the World Health Organization. So let's just flop us back here onto the screen. All right. So to get us started, let's talk about some of the ingredients that are in them. Actually, I'm just going to go ahead and throw this recipe on the screen. All right. So here's the recipe on the screen. I basically took the ingredients and dialed them down to make 1/3 of a quart of hand sanitizer, which should be quite a bit, actually. Um, so that ends up being 1 cup of 99% isopropyl alcohol, 1 tablespoon hydrogen peroxide, 3%, 1 teaspoon of glycerin, and enough water to make the total equal 1 1/3 cups, essentially. Um, so let's kind of talk about some of these ingredients. Let's see, isopropyl alcohol. The purpose of the isopropyl alcohol in the mix is what?
Primarily, what's going to kill everything. The alcohol helps destroy the virus specifically, but also bacteria, any small uh, pathogens, amoeba, stuff like that.
Right. The exactly the rubbing alcohol or the isopropyl alcohol in this recipe is going to worm its little way into the virus, bacteria, and germ proteins and essentially disintegrate them. It kind of does something similar to your skin cells as well by itself, which is not really good for your hands. Um, which, interestingly enough, so the requirement to be above 60% alcohol has to do with being in there in a high enough concentration to break those proteins down. The requirement of being below 90% alcohol actually has to do with the fact that alcohol preserves things really well. So what alcohol will actually do at 100% or a strength greater than 90 is preserve the bacteria on your hands. It creates a hardened shell around the protein that it's trying to break down rather than destroy it. So the water and the alcohol mixed together, it's just enough water to get through the cell walls of the protein that the alcohol then breaks down. So that's really the main active ingredient in a proper hand sanitizer recipe. So aside from that, the second ingredient on the list is 1 tablespoon of hydrogen peroxide, 3%. The purpose of this ingredient in the mixture, according to the World Health Organization, is essentially just to sterilize your mix. Um, it actually has no effect as far as sanitizing your skin. It has an effect of sanitizing the mix. And I mean, Steve and I pretty much hypothesize that hydrogen peroxide pretty much turns back into water after
Yeah,
it
it
breaks
should,
down.
especially exposed to UV light. For the concentrations that we're talking about, it'll exposed to UV light for 5-10 minutes. It'll degrade back into water.
Right. Then the third ingredient in here, glycerin. Glycerin is essentially there as a humectant, which means that it holds in water, and so the idea of the glycerin is to somewhat counteract the effects of the alcohol on your skin, kind of moisturize it somewhat, as well as a bit of an emulsifier. And then, of course, the water is to bring it to the proper concentration. You'll notice down there I also have a little bit of instructions in the recipe that talk about the proportions for other strengths of isopropyl alcohol. For example, for 91% alcohol, we start with 1 cup plus 4 teaspoons, which is actually 265 milliliters. And then for 70% alcohol, you would start with 1 1/4 cups. And then you use the remaining for water. I actually have 91% here today, so I'm going to do 1 cup plus 4 teaspoons when we start to mix it. I'm going to pass the mic over to Steve real quick while I get my camera set up and let him talk about something for a little bit.
Sure. So, we all know that it's important to wash our hands. A lot of us are quarantined. I kind of quarantined myself because I had a bit of a cough this morning. Turns out it's kind of gone away. I'm still going to keep a monitor on it, but um, this is a big deal across the world right now. Everybody's a little bit on edge because of coronavirus, or COVID-19, or whatever they're calling it. the World Health Organization, the CDC both put out a lot of good recommendations of washing our hands. If you're feeling sick, stay at home. Don't get around anybody else. If you know someone who is sick, just try to quarantine yourself and get away. This thing is new. It's kind of scary. Fortunately, it doesn't look like it's been horribly dangerous, but it is if you have underlying health conditions and or you're elderly. So if you're one of those people at risk, definitely make sure you stay inside and stock up on some hand sanitizer. I went to the store the other day and it was a little crazy. So if you have some alcohol maybe in your medicine cabinet, this might be a way to get that and use it to make sure that you're safe and you're good.
Yeah.
So it looks like you're ready.
Yep. Looks like I'm all set up here. Go ahead and cut to my screen. Okay, so here we have the setup. We have basically the ingredients that we talked about. Main one here, distilled water. The active ingredient would be, in my case, 91% isopropyl alcohol. Another option in case you can't find this at the store, which I think, Steve, you said that you were not able to find, is you can use Everclear grain alcohol. This pint here is more than enough and cost me approximately $7 at the liquor store here. And then we also have, I'm using vegetable glycerin, which I got at the Health Nut. So for the first step of our recipe, I got to open this up here because I don't prepare ahead of time, I guess. I actually keep this around for my 3D printer. I keep this around so that I can wash prints off of my 3D printer. So I actually happen to have a bunch of this anyway. But yeah, so my little thing that I'm using here has, I don't know if the camera can pick that up, but it has graduated lines on it. So I'm going to be using that to measure here. And what I say for our recipe, let me switch back to that screen real quick. I said 1 cup and plus 4 teaspoons, right? So I'm going to put 1 cup. One cup, exactly on that mark. Set that aside. And oh, I need 4 teaspoons, I guess. Won't set it aside quite yet. This is to make sure that we have the proper concentration of alcohol since I'm using only 91. All right. Now I'm going to get that out of the way. I'm going to wipe this off as well. All right. I'm going to do 1 tablespoon of hydrogen peroxide. My tablespoon here. And I realize these are dry mixing things, but these are going to be just fine for what we're doing. All right. 1 tablespoon hydrogen peroxide. I'll wipe that off as well. Get that out of the way. Then 1 teaspoon of the glycerin. The glycerin's kind of thick, so I'm actually going to not only pour that in there, I'm going to kind of use this to stir with it and get that all off of there while I do this, get this out of the way. So for any of you guys watching, this is the World Health Organization approved recipe, okay? This is how you know you're going to be safe. Okay. Now that we got that all mixed together, get this stuff out of the way. And then, according to our recipe here, we want to make a total of 1 1/3 cups. So my mark is actually on this side, so I will pour water in until 1 1/3 cups. All right. So that hand sanitizer is all made. I got this little container. It's a spray bottle. So the interesting thing about their recipe is this is completely liquid. Okay, it's not like the nice gel stuff that you buy at the store, which we'll actually talk about after this as well. Possibility for making this into gel. So I'm just going to open this container. This one happens to be a little spray bottle, spray type container. So if I can get this in here without making a giant mess. All right, and I'll leave a little room at the top so that I can shake it all good. Mix that together, shake it up, and now you have, spray it down, give your hands a little rub. Clean hands. I got a whole lot left as well. And essentially you just carry this around. So now we talk about gel. Nobody likes to spray hand sanitizer on their hands. It's just not convenient, especially driving or any other thing really. Just liquid just doesn't work out well. The spray is not too bad, to be honest. But anyway, essentially throughout my research, what I found is, if I can switch back to my browser here, let's see. All right, so what I found through my research is this. There's something called polyacrylic acid. Polyacrylic acid, according to Wikipedia, is a synthetic high molecular weight polymer of acrylic acid. If you look closer down here, it's sold as a white fluffy powder, frequently used as gels in cosmetic and personal care products. So if you look down in applications, it's a popular thickening agent, which is exactly what you would want to do. It says a thickening agent or thickener is a substance which can increase the viscosity of a liquid without substantially changing its other properties. So with that being the goal, I decided to look into polyacrylic acids. And I found one called Carbomer 940. And if my browser decides to load, you can actually buy it on Amazon. I don't have any here, or I would mix it for you guys on the video. But here you can see that it's $12.69 and free shipping for 1.8 ounces of it. And this stuff actually doesn't take very much, just a few grams. This is a 50-gram bag. I did find a video on YouTube so we can kind of get an idea of what it does and how it works. And I'll just I'm buffering.
I'm reading the recommendations here. The glycerin can cause the mixture to be a little bit sticky. You can actually dilute that a little bit with water.
The glycerin?
Yeah, the glycerin.
Sure. I just sprayed it on my hands and actually doesn't feel sticky to me at all, but I could see that being the case. But yeah, my video isn't loading very well, but as you can see in this video, there is a person here who kind of looks like a scientist mixing what was a powder. They mixed in a little bit of water, then they're pouring it here, just mixing by hand, and it was a liquid, which essentially you would pour that powder into the liquid we just made, and then as you mix, it takes only a few seconds here, and it turns itself into a nice thick gel that we all love. And that would be hospital grade, World Health Organization approved hand sanitizer. Pretty neat, actually. So before we go, and this was a pretty short one, I kind of just want to give a rundown of what we're doing here, why we're doing this. I called this the Phorge online classes quarantine series, not because we're quarantined, but because in the event, I guess I was kind of running through this in my head. And in the event that you do get quarantined, not only are you going to be bored, you viewers out there, I'm going to be bored as well. And so I have no problems doing a little video podcast to teach people how to do certain things. In this scenario, I would consider these important things to be things like making hand sanitizer, making soap, maybe sewing, other things like that. Essentially, we're just out here trying to spread positive vibes, show the community of Sheridan that we like to make things and that you can make things too. At the end of the day, you know, we are actually a physical makerspace. As Steve talked about in the beginning, we plan to open our doors in, was going to be April, but with this whole situation, it may be around May. Our website is www.phorge, that's phorge.co. You can go there, learn a little bit about us. We are accepting donations. We have a GoFundMe campaign. Let's see, is there anybody in the live chat here? No, not at the moment. So I'll put it in the a link in the description below to the GoFundMe campaign. And then anything you guys can do to help us, you know, open the doors, bring this organization to people in the community of Sheridan would be greatly appreciated. At the end of the day, we just want to make things, and we want to spread that knowledge around. Steve, anything you want to add?
Absolutely. Yeah, I really want to emphasize that we want to share, making things. Spencer, I know you and I have worked on a lot of projects together where we're making things.
Oh yeah.
If anyone out there that's watching this wants to learn how to make something and wants us to do a video on it, or put on some sort of event, let us know. We'd love to look into it, especially if it's something simple and easy where we can show off some stuff. I have a lot of ideas on where we can take this, and hopefully you enjoyed this, and hopefully we'll see you there at the space.
All right. Sounds great. I think that about covers it for today's edition of Phorge Online Classes, quarantine edition, I will say again. All right, guys. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.